Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. Just 18 minutes after 8. We focus now on, yes, perhaps we look at it from a legal perspective because we're joined by Mr. Wahab Shittu, who is a legal practitioner. Morning, thank you for coming on today.
It's my pleasure to be here.
But I know that when you talk about corruption, there are different perspectives that people have about it and different perception about it as well. But you have been in court on several matters about cases that have got to do with our fight towards ensuring that we stamp out corruption or reduce it to the barest minimum at that. From your efforts, can you really say that we seem to have been doing our best, or we're just doing maybe far less than we could actually do?
Thank you very much. I think the best way to answer that question is to toy with figures. And the questions to ask is, where are we presently? In terms of the assessment of Transparency International, which is the body that in 2013, for instance, Transparency International assessed 177 countries, out of which Nigeria is rated 144th. That assessment shows that our corruption performance, our performance is worse than that of last year, when we scored 27 points last year out of a possible 100 points. And this year we scored 25 points. I mean, we are coming down in terms of assessment. So if you want to look at that rating and what Transparency International considers such factors as abuse of power, secret dealings, and as well as bribery and embezzlement. Those are factors. And largely, the focus is on public sector corruption. So if you want to look at it from that perspective, you want to say that corruption is a major issue.
I think the first question we should ask you is, do you agree? Because some people will tell you that they do not trust Transparency International. Do you agree with the ratings of Transparency International?
Well, to a large extent, I agree with the rating of Transparency International. Because we look at even the exchange of letters between the president, the former president, and the current president, both of them agree that corruption has been a major issue. Mm-hmm. As far as our developmental process is concerned. But having said that, I think again it's also important for us to assess what has been achieved so far by anti-graft agencies, mainly FCC.
Is it in the light of this rating?
No, in spite of the rating. In spite of the rating, we all agree that corruption is a major issue, and that as far as our performance is concerned, globally, we have not been doing enough. But in spite of that, some efforts have been made, and it is also important for us to appreciate the efforts that have been made, as well as the challenges.
Okay, while you talk about that in a minute, one wonders, because if you ask perhaps any public official about this Transparency International's rating, they'll pick holes in it. And then one wonders, so what would be their yardstick of measurements if they disagree with the one released by Transparency International? What template are we using to assess our performance in our fight of corruption?
You see, corruption is a global issue, and Transparency International is a world body, and it has its own criteria. So if that criteria, certain countries are judged the cleanest countries. I mean, countries like Denmark and a country like New Zealand scored 91 points out of a possible 100 points. And then if you look at Africa, for instance, country like Botswana is adjudged the cleanest country. And in West Africa, Ghana is rated very highly as the cleanest country. So you can see, except you are able to come forward with statistics showing bias, there is difficult to fault what Transparency International has been doing in terms of this assessment. But having said that, maybe we also need to do more, particularly now that our leaders have openly come forward to acknowledge the fact that corruption is a major issue, and that is why you keep on, of all the topics you have been discussing. I was on daily. Corruption is the most is the issue in all of these controversies that you are talking about. But that does not say that that does not mean that the anti-graft agencies are not working.
What are they doing? I mean, do you have any?
For instance, if you look at the figures released out by EFCC in September 2013, EFCC confirmed that out of the 368 cases that were taken, that were charged to court in 2013, EFCC was able to secure 80 convictions within the period between January to August
this year.
This year, 2013. And out of that, apart from that, EFCC was also able to make substantial recoveries, and that also is very significant. For instance, the sum of let me confirm the figures. The sum of the figures that were the sum of 6.5 billion was recovered
From public officials?
Yes. 19.2 million was also recovered, and the sum of 19,000 pounds was recovered in 2013 by EFCC. And the figure released by EFCC in December shows that in the last 10 years, EFCC has managed to secure about 1,000 convictions. And recently, one prominent one is the one I secured, a former chairman of local government in Adabi local government, who was sentenced to 6 months in prison and currently languishing in prison. So EFCC is making efforts. But again, we also have to appreciate that the business of fighting corruption, like I've always emphasized here, and all of you know, is not the business of anti-graft agencies alone. It's a collective fight.
Well,
and I think that is the perspective we should look at it.
No, we definitely would look at that because, I wanted us to also look at some issues. You talked about recovery.
Recovery.
Because Olisa Agbakoba recently said something concerning recovery, which he also said shouldn't also be within the EFCC. He said, well, the way it is done in the UK and some other parts of the world, well, EFCC should just maybe go ahead maybe with the investigations, and we can as well leave the recovery for another agency, because as it is now, looks that the EFCC has a whole lot on its plate. And how do you relate that to the news we heard recently about EFCC not having enough money in its account to help run that particular agency?
Well, that's precisely the problem. I think whoever is responsible for underfunding EFCC, if that news item is correct, and I think if the Commission Secretary can come out to say that is the position, whoever is responsible for underfunding EFCC is doing a great disservice to our country. And I think all the tiers of government, particularly the executive and then the legislature, must, explain to Nigerians why EFCC is being underfunded. Because a body like EFCC should be adequately funded. Because if you want to fight corruption, corruption is multidimensional. You have to understand the nature of corruption. Like I said, for instance, embezzlement, bribery, favoritism, and all kinds of factors constitute corruption. So if you, for instance, if you want to fight corruption, you must understand corruption. There must be a mechanism for preventing corruption. There must be a mechanism for detection of corruption. There must be a mechanism for prosecution of corruption. There must also be a mechanism for resolution of corruption.
Do we have all this in place?
No, this mechanism cannot effectively work the funding element is absent.
Now,
So that I think is the focus that we should focus on. Is it true that EFCC is underfunded? If it's underfunded, then we are in serious trouble.